Hey gang, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave from Chase the Summit, and in this video we're going to be comparing the brand new Garmin Forerunner 55 against the older Garmin Forerunner 245. How do these two stack up head to head? These are two affordable and popular running watches from Garmin that have a lot in common. But the one thing they don't have in common is the price. The new Garmin Forerunner 55 comes in at just $200, whereas the older Garmin Forerunner 245 or 245 Music comes in between $299 or $349. So it's quite a bit more money for the 245. Is it worth it? Let's find out today. Before we get into this video though, I do want to thank the sponsor of this video, and that is playbetter.com. Playbetter.com is a USA authorized Garmin retailer that offers free 2-day shipping and a no-hassle free 60-day return policy. So you can change your mind up to 2 months later and still get your money back, which is a great deal. Not only that though, they're real people and you can give them a call and ask what watch you should buy and bounce ideas off them, and they're happy to help. So if you are interested in picking up the Garmin 55 or 245 or any Garmin watch for that matter, definitely check out the links in the description because they do help support my channel and they cost nothing extra to you. And while you're down there, maybe hit that thumbs up and subscribe button because that helps me out too. Okay, let's move on. First up, let's take a look at the hardware. Here we have the Garmin Forerunner 55, and here we have the Garmin Forerunner 245. And at first glance, they are pretty darn similar. They're almost exactly the same size. Both of these watches are made entirely out of plastic. There is no metal here. However, the Garmin Forerunner 245 does have stainless steel buttons that you can see there, while the Garmin Forerunner 55, I think, has plastic buttons, but it's hard to tell. They could be metal. Flipping the watches over, again, they're almost identical. You can see they have the same proprietary charging port and a very similar looking heart rate sensor in the middle here. However, there is some differences on the heart rate sensor, which we'll talk about a little later on in this video. The Garmin Forerunner 245 is 42.3 millimeters in diameter, where the Garmin Forerunner 55 is 42 millimeters in diameter. So there's only a 0.3 millimeter diameter difference. This isn't something you're going to notice when it's on your wrist. It's a really small difference in overall size. The same goes for the thickness. The 245 is 12.2 millimeters thick, where the 55 is 11.6 millimeters thick. Again, it's really hard to notice when you're holding them or when they're on your wrist. And again, when it comes to the weight of these two watches, the Forerunner 55 comes in at just 37 grams, which is super light, but the Garmin Forerunner 245 is only 38.5 grams, so it's only a gram and a half heavier. Again, not something I can notice, like perceivable to the human weight scale of my hands. It's really not noticeable. These are both very small and lightweight watches. They definitely don't get in the way. And here's what the two watches look like on my men's 165 millimeter circumference wrist. We've got the Garmin Forerunner 55 on the right side of the screen and the 245 on the left side of the screen. When it comes to the actual build quality of the 245 and 55, again, they're pretty darn similar. I think they use the same manufacturing technique. These don't have like screws in them or anything. They're just kind of glued together, but they do feel really robust when they're on your wrist. They don't feel like they're gonna break or anything. And of course, both of these watches are waterproof to a depth of 50 meters or 5 atmospheres, so you can go in the pool with them, you can shower with them, just no deep water diving or anything like that. If you haven't noticed already, one of the larger differences between the 245 on the left here and the 55 on the right here is going to be the size of the actual display in the watch. Even though the outside diameter of these two watches is very similar, the screens are much different. So on the 245, you've got a 1.2 inch transflective display, and on the 55, you've got a 1.04 inch reflective display. So they're both the same display technology, but the 245 has a much larger display. And because the case size is the same, the bezels on the 245 are much thinner, so that just gives it a more modern appearance when you're looking at it. Both of these watches do have a backlight to light them up in the dark, and you can trigger that with the top left button here, and they both have the gesture-based backlight where you can flip your wrist up and they'll light up. I will say that the Garmin Forerunner 245 does have a crisper, higher contrast backlight. It also gets a little bit brighter, where the Forerunner 55 is a little bit washed out and bluish looking, and you can't tweak the backlight brightness on these. There's no settings for that, so they are what they are out of the box. In terms of battery life, it's kind of interesting between these two. So on the Forerunner 55, you can get up to 2 weeks of standby time or smartwatch mode, or up to 20 hours of GPS on activity time, which is pretty good. It's a little bit different on the 245, where you can get up to 7 days of standby time, so it's a lot less than the 55, but in GPS on time, you actually get 24 hours on the 245 versus the 20 hours on the 55, which is kind of interesting. In terms of the user interface between the 245 and 55, they're pretty similar again. However, there are some differences. So you can see here that both do feature Garmin's widget glances, which is kind of a truncated view of full page widgets. So you can actually see more information at a glance rather than one full page widget, which I really like. And both of these watches do feature fully customizable watch faces. However, the Garmin Forerunner 245 does come with watch faces that feature more data fields, so you can show more information on the watch face at a glance. That said, both of these watches are compatible with Garmin's Connect IQ store, so you can actually download additional watch faces and install them from third-party developers, and there's a lot of choices to choose from on the Connect IQ platform. In terms of like overall snappiness and responsiveness of the user interface, I'm gonna give the edge to the Garmin Forerunner 245 here, and you can even see when I start scrolling through widgets here that the 245 has little animations when you're scrolling, and everything is just a little bit more fluid and smooth, whereas the 55 is just a little bit more choppy and jerky. It gets the job done, and it's not something you'd notice if you didn't have them side by side, but because I do notice it. Both of these watches do offer Bluetooth connectivity to connect to your phone, obviously, so you can connect to Garmin Connect, but they also have Bluetooth connectivity so you can connect external heart rate sensors, which is really nice as well. Both the Forerunner 55 and 245 are compatible with Ant Plus and Bluetooth external sensors. However, neither of these watches can pair to a power sensor for cycling, which is unfortunate. Another thing I've noticed between the user interfaces of the 55 and 245, and this one's going to be pretty nuanced, is that when you're actually in an activity, so if I start a running activity on both watches here, you can see that if I hold the lower left button on the 55, nothing happens. But if I hold the lower left button on the 245, I can actually get back to my watch face and scroll through all of my widgets while not stopping my activity. So I can click back again, click back one more time, and now I'm back into my activity, never stopped recording, and if I want to go out and read a text message or look at the weather data or something like that, I can do that. Whereas on the Garmin Forerunner 55, I'm trapped in the activity. I can't actually leave it by long pressing that lower left button, and I think that's a limitation of the CPU power on the 55. In terms of wellness tracking on the Forerunner 55 and 245, again, very similar, not surprising there. Both will track your steps, your intensity minutes for the day and week, and also your calories burned. And of course, both of these watches will track your sleep and sync it over to Garmin Connect so you can analyze it after the fact. And on the topic of wellness tracking, both of these watches do offer Garmin's body battery and stress tracking. Body battery essentially turns your body into a virtual battery. So you wake up in the morning at 100%, and throughout the day you drain down. If you go for a run, it drains a little bit faster. If you're working hard and stressed out, it drains fast. And then when you go to bed, you actually charge the battery back up. And the goal is to get back to 100% in the morning. And if you're not at 100%, maybe you shouldn't go for that long run that day. If you want to learn more about body battery as a whole, I actually have a whole video about this that you can check out up here. So go check that out if you're interested. Both the 55 and 245 will record your all-day heart rate data at an interval of 1 second samples, and you can analyze this all after the fact in Garmin Connect. However, one feature that the Forerunner 245 has that the 55 doesn't have is pulse ox, and that's a additional sensor on the back of the watch that can actually pick up your blood oxygen saturation level right from your wrist. How useful this feature is to you can vary. If you live in a place where you're training at altitude, it might be helpful for you, but for me, I live basically at sea level, so it's not something I use all the time. When it comes to smartwatch features between the 55 and 245, they're basically identical. They'll read your Instagram messages and text messages, and when you have an incoming call come in, you can either accept or decline it right from the watch, which is pretty helpful. And both the Forerunner 55 and 245 will display calendar events, so if someone's birthday is coming up, it'll pop up on the watch and remind you. Both the 55 and 245 also have Garmin's weather widget, which is really nice. It shows you your current temperature, the highs and lows for the day, and then an upcoming forecast by hour and by day, which is really helpful to have right on your wrist. The final topic we'll talk about in terms of smartwatch stuff is going to be music controls. Both the Forerunner 55 and 245 can actually control the music on your phone remotely right from the watch. This can be really useful if you've got your earbuds in and your phone's buried in your backpack or something like that. You can switch tracks, you can turn up and down the music. It's a pretty helpful feature. On the topic of music though, the Garmin Forerunner 245 also has the added option to have music on board the device itself. So you can download music from Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, and some other platforms right to the watch's internal storage and listen to it phone free with wireless earbuds. This feature is an additional $50 on the Garmin Forerunner 245 to upgrade to the 245 Music for $350, where the regular 245 is $299. If that feature is worth it to you, it's probably worth the 50 bucks. Otherwise, you can just buy the cheaper one. Unfortunately though, the Forerunner 55 does not have this option at all. Both the Forerunner 55 and 245 feature Garmin's Assistance feature, which if you hold the top left button on both watches, you can see it pops up to the controls, and now we've got an option for assistance. However, the feature is pretty different between these two devices. So in the Garmin Forerunner 245, if you press Assistance, you can see it immediately goes into a countdown where it would send for help to one of my contacts, which I'll cancel right now. But on the Forerunner 55, if I click Assistance, I've actually got some options. I can actually click on my contacts, and then I could actually choose a message to send to my contacts. I suspect that they'll upgrade the firmware of the 245 to match, but right now this is how it is. When it comes to fitness and training tools between the Garmin Forerunner 55 and 245, they're pretty similar, but there are differences again. So both watches do feature Garmin's estimated VO2 max, which is backed by First Beat technology, and I find that it's pretty accurate, although I've never been lab tested, so what do I know? And when I click down, you can see that both of these watches also offer the race predictor, and I found this to be pretty accurate as well with times that I've run in the past. And another thing they have in common is that both watches do feature Garmin's Recovery Advisor that'll let you know how long you need to wait after a certain training session before doing another training session. And for me, it looks like I can go for a run in another hour or so. That's kind of where the similarities end here. Let's talk about what the 245 has that the 55 does not. First up, we've got training status, and this will tell you if you're improving fitness, maintaining your fitness, you're detraining, you're peaking. It'll let you know where you are in your fitness level at a given time. The 245 also offers training load, which is a very handy tool. This will help you identify where your optimal load is in terms of training volume on a given week. So you can see here that my previous 7-day training load is 792, and that this little arrow is pointing right in the middle of this green zone at the top here that represents the optimal training load. And another feature that the Garmin Forerunner 245 has over the 55 is that it'll actually give you an estimated VO2 max on trail runs, which the 55 cannot do because it doesn't even have a trail running activity profile. And that's unfortunate because if you go on a trail run with the running activity on the 55 and it tries to give you a VO2 max, that'll be skewed because you're trail running and not on a road. So yeah, that's an advantage to the Garmin Forerunner 245. And that's a good segue into activity profiles. In terms of activity profiles between the 55 and 245, again, pretty similar, but there are a few extras on the 245 that are not present on the 55. For instance, again, the Garmin Forerunner 245 does have that trail running activity, but it also has the strength training activity, where the 55 does not have that installed. However, there is one activity that's available on the Forerunner 55 that is not available on the Forerunner 245 for whatever reason, and that is high intensity interval training. The Forerunner 55 has it, 245 does not. I don't know why. Both the 55 and 245 do have the suggested workout feature you can see here. These suggested workouts are based on your previous activity history, and it will try to suggest complementary workouts to your past activities. What's interesting is that both of these watches are suggesting a different workout right now. So the 55 is suggesting a recovery run at a 10-minute pace, and the 245 is suggesting a base workout at an 840 pace. So I'm not sure which one's right. In terms of actually running with these watches and displaying usable data, they're very similar again. Both can feature up to 4 data fields on a given page, and you can have multiple pages of information here that you can scroll through, and all of these pages can be fully customized within the watch itself. All right, let's talk about another area where the Garmin Forerunner 245 has a big advantage over the 55, and that's going to be in terms of navigation. The Garmin Forerunner 245 has navigation features built in. You can actually upload a course to this watch and follow it in real time, so you don't get lost when you're out on your trail run or even on a road run. This is not full-blown mapping, but it does mean you can design a course in Garmin Connect before your run, upload it to the watch, and then follow it in real time while you're out running. Another useful feature with the navigation is the back to start function, which means you can go and get lost on a trail hiking or running or whatever, and then hit back to start, and the watch will actually guide you back to the beginning of your activity using a breadcrumb trail map on the watch itself. Unfortunately, the Garmin Forerunner 55 does not have any form of navigation features. That's just not something it does. I've got my computer here, and now we're gonna take a look at GPS accuracy. Okay, so what we're looking at here is my iPhone 12 Pro in orange, the Garmin Forerunner 55 in blue, and then the Forerunner 245 in red. As I pan around my track here, it's pretty clear that the iPhone 12 Pro is doing the worst job here, and that's Not very surprising. And what I like to look at when comparing tracks is corners to see how sharp they are. So you can see on this corner that the blue line probably appears to be the most accurate, and that actually kind of looks to be the case all the way down this road. As I pan around the track here, I think we're gonna be splitting hairs between differences between the Garmin Forerunner 245 and 55 in terms of GPS accuracy. I don't think there's much to be talked about here. And I've got a bunch of runs with these two watches, and I can say that they're pretty similar. And at the end of every run, they're within 1/10 of a mile of each other in terms of distance. Okay, moving on to something that's a little bit more quantifiable is going to be heart rate accuracy. So what we're looking at here is the Polar H9 chest strap, which is a very accurate heart rate sensor that I wear on my chest. That is in red on this graph. Then we're looking at the Forerunner 245 in blue and the Forerunner 55 in purple. So the goal here is for the Forerunner 55 and 245 to match up with that red line, which is the Polar H9. I mean, from a high level, both the Forerunner 55 and 245 are actually doing a pretty good job. Surprisingly good on this run, actually. There's one little deviation here if I zoom in really far, where the Polar H9 dropped down to 130 beats per minute, and the other two were at 134 and 139. But really, again, that's kind of splitting hairs. Let's zoom in over here. Again, they're all looking pretty similar. Let's zoom in on this really spiky segment at the end here. And in this area, I would say that the Forerunner 55 is doing a slightly better job, but there are some spikes where the Forerunner 55 is a little high right there. Again, both acceptable, both not perfect, but they're right in line with the Polar H9 chest strap, which is all you can ask for, really. Okay, final topic in this video, and that's gonna be price and value. The Garmin Forerunner 55 comes in at just $199, whereas the Forerunner 245 starts at $299 and goes all the way up for $349 with the music built in. Is it worth that extra $100 to $150? Well, it kind of depends on a few things. In summary, the Garmin Forerunner 245 has a larger display, more training tools with the training load and all that stuff built in. It's got navigation features, which can be really powerful if you find yourself in a situation where you need that sort of thing. And it's got slightly longer battery life in GPS mode by 4 hours, which can be handy at like a 100-miler or something like that. And of course, for that $50 upcharge, you can also have offline music. However, the Garmin Forerunner 55 presents a unique value proposition because it's got a lot of the guts of the 245, but it is much cheaper. And at $200, I'd like to say that this is one of the better value propositions on the market right now for a dedicated running watch. Unless you're comparing it to the COROS Pace 2, which I actually recently made a video about, and you can find that up here if you want to watch that one. At the end of the day though, it's really up to you to decide which one's right for you. I can't make that decision for you. Will you utilize the extra features of the 245? Then maybe go for it. If you're not going to use those extra features, then the Forerunner 55 is a great option at $200. Ultimately though, these are both excellent options, and I don't think you'd be disappointed with either one. Okay, I think that's all I've got for this one. If you made it to the end of this video, why don't you hit that thumbs up button down below, because you probably liked it. And while you're down there, consider subscribing so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. And like I said before, I do want to thank playbetter.com for sponsoring this video, and if you're interested in picking up either the Forerunner 55 or 245, head over to the links in the description to find the best pricing available right now. Okay, it is hot in here and I gotta go. So yeah, bye.